Minato's explanation is simple. With a wave of his hand, he lets the facade of the school rooftop drop, and Akechi finds himself floating at the edge of the sea again, having barely left where he'd been before Minato scooped him up. The sea's gentle glow is nothing next to the large golden door he now faces though, something that he notes with a bit of disgust was panelled with twitching eyes. It's not as if he hasn't seen anything stranger with his adventures in Mementos, but the element of rejection is still there as he lets his eyes truly capture what he had only seen a glimpse of before. Chains, dozens, all looped around a door. A great seal binding the stone figure of Minato with it. As embarrassing as it may be, the other side is greatly cognitive. Minato's disaffected voice resounds in Akechi's head as Akechi's widened eyes take the whole scene in. It was one thing to know your newly made friend was some sort of modern messiah figure, and another entirely to be confronted to his eternally chained form himself. Desires like the wish for mortality, for control, for love and hope, all can become physical symbolic entities, which, if grown strong enough, can affect reality. I am blessed with great friends. Each of these chains is one of my irreplaceable friends. They give me strength to hold on to keep Nyx at bay, and I may have been called the savior quite a bit by friends who didn't wish to explain the whole story. I am no longer human, although I am a little different. You can think of me akin to a persona, a denizen of the other side of reality. I am myself, but I also embody the cognitions who desire me, who acknowledge me, who wish for me. One of these chains is you, Goro. You may have yearned for death in your hardest times, but you must have also wished for salvation. As long as that hope exists, I can save you. Why? He knew, didn't he? Akechi is, the pathetic boy who would have let the world he tried so hard to save burn to the ground if it could have let him have his one selfish wish of destroying Shido. There must be so many more who deserve a chance at redemption than him. That other wild card. He needed you. The world didn't continue being saved. You're a wild card. You have the keys to answer the riddle yourself. But more than that, I believe in you, Goro. I know you'll do the right thing. You're insane. That's all Akechi can choke out as he battles to breathe. Do the right thing? His whole life was a series of bad decisions and selfishness. His sense of fairness had disappeared somewhere in the orphanage when older kids stole everyone's food, and morality flew completely out the window when Shido smiled and praised him when he presented him another successful mental breakdown. He is the complete opposite of the literal saint that Minato is, that he obviously thought Akechi could also be. Was that other boy's naivety or insight? It figures, doesn't it, that the second person who would ever believe in himself came after he's dead, when everything is over and done with. Why? Why didn't he meet Akira, Minato, sooner? Minato, I've long lost what it means to do the right thing, he tries again. Minato's frozen features don't reply, and Akechi struggles not to lose himself into a wild fit of near-manic giggles, managing to compose himself by folding his fingers together and taking a deep breath. I am a horrible, selfish person, he continues, telling himself to breathe. Breathe, don't laugh, don't burn, don't expect, don't hope. And I really, really don't care about the world you're trying to save. I'm not good with words, but Goro, we're friends, and I care for you. And I hope you care for me. And if you do, I hope you also care that I love the world. Humans are flawed and beautiful. Minato's voice fades away, and Akechi listens, still, silent, wondering. Minato's sightless eyes stare over him, unjudgmental. Standing there, he feels strangely like an undeserving sinner, praying for succor to a god underneath the shadow of the golden door, bathed in its eerie warm glow. Minato believes and accepts him, even in his ugliest, most defeated form, and it's heavy. It's a weight that grounds him as he stares at the willingly trapped form of his friend, and in the end, it is Akechi that pulls his eyes away and heaves out a deep sigh of exasperation. What a choice. Is he willing to go through all of that again? Akechi might be a little more worn down after his long talk with Minato, a little less blinded maybe, from his recognition that Shido will never recognize him. Still, it isn't an entirely abhorrent idea. Even now, something burns viciously in Akechi's chest at the thought of the world going on without him. after having stolen everything away from him. And perhaps there may be a person he wants to see again. I can't promise anything, but I'll try saving the world. Minato's stone statue is worn and cracked, like a sand-weathered fountain in an old public park, vague and worn, and obviously expressionless. But when Akechi looks at it, he feels like he could imagine his smile, the slight warmth in his words. It is the easy familiarity that he'd once dreamed of when watching Featherman R and his merry band of friends saving the world. It's the thing he hated, burning in envy when he saw the same camaraderie in the Phantom Thieves, something that was never extended to him. Try living without rejecting the world this time, my friend. It's more beautiful than you think. Akechi says nothing to Minato in return, just letting the image of him chained to the door burn into his mind, unblinking even against the white glow that builds around Minato the longer he stands there. Whiter, brighter, as if the dawn itself was blossoming in Minato's chest before the light rolled over him in a wave. Then he is gone. It is suddenly dark. Instead of Minato's strangely warm presence, there is a large hulking shadow in front of him, who looks at him now with a hint of impatience in the line of his mouth, the familiar face of dismissal still somehow hurtful even after all the things that man had done to him. Emotions, of course, are illogical. Well, Shido's impatient scowl hides a vein of calculation, a finger tapping the table as he glares at Akechi through his glasses. His murderer, his father. Have you taken enough time to check the contract? I'm a very busy man. Akechi blinks, startling when the clench of his fingers makes the paper in his hands crinkle. Breathe in. The smell of leather carpet cleaner. No stardust, no emptiness. A ceiling, no stars. Minato's gone. Instead, Shido replaces him, sitting in the dim shadows of crystal lamps, eyes unreadable behind his tinted glasses. The air conditioning in the other room whirs smoothly to life, bringing a wave of cold air to his feet. Minato threw him right in front of Shido. And because it is Shido, he doesn't allow himself to process or think. Oh, my apologies. He slips back into old habit, sliding a well-practiced smile onto his face. It feels oily and plastic after talking for so long with Minato, but any time with Shido is no time to lose control. I was just scanning over the small text. Please wait a moment more. When he looks down, the contract he's holding is more than familiar. This is what he'd been presented with when he approached Shido, after he had saved him with the powers of the metaverse. The white hands that hold the paper is a surprise. He hadn't started to wear his gloves yet when he was 15, and brimming with petty teenage ambitions. A brief glance around tells him they were sitting in one of Shido's more nondescript high-rises, with dim lights to show off the floor-to-ceiling windows, to his immediate left. The beautiful multicolored spread of the Tokyo nightscape is a sight for sore eyes, the glitter playing off the sleek, elegant trimmings of the apartment. He can't take too much time, though, or Shido would get suspicious. A quick glance over the contract reminds him exactly what he'd agreed to when he was still too young, too stupid. His very first contract with Shido stipulated Akechi would agree to do 3 things. Number 1, never reveal that he had a connection with Shido. Number 2, never reveal the metaverse to anyone without Shido's permission. Number 3, weekly experiments to test the limits of the possibilities of the metaverse under Shido's supervision and suggestion. In return, Shido will provide 3 things in return. Number 1, complete emancipation as a legal adult. Number 2, provision of an apartment with a weekly living stipend as long as he continues experimentation with Shido. Number 3, Akechi's continued safety during metaverse experimentation. Akechi has to stop himself from succumbing to derisive laughter. It's too easy to remember what happened last time. Dazzled by the expensive apartment and Shido's regard, Akechi had pretended to be confident as he put his name down on both copies of the contracts after merely skimming it, buoyed with the hummingbird happiness of his impending freedom. An adult with his own apartment. Imagine that, his younger self jittered. He could finally be free. Being secure with his knowledge that he was irreplaceable as the only person with access to the metaverse filled him with arrogant self-importance that, in hindsight, Shido had fanned for his own benefit. Shido now shifts in his seat, leather creaking in the silent room. Akechi smiles as he places the paper onto the low table in between them. In the future, Shido would hold their meetings in his office, with a large, imposing table between, with nowhere for Akechi to sit as he gives his reports. I'm happy with these conditions. I only have a few questions I want to ask, Akechi says smoothly, bringing his hands politely back to his lap, but letting one of his fingers fidget with the seam in his pants. What sort of apartment are you promising me? And please enlighten me with how upon I'm going to access my weekly stipends without revealing our connection. Shido frowns, heavy brows pulling together as he draws himself forward, subtly mirroring Akechi's posture in his shoulders. Masterful, putting pressure while still maintaining a sense of camaraderie with him. No wonder his 15-year-old self sank so deep so fast. I have a few apartments under a different identity that you can choose from if the choice is so important to you. Shido's voice is a deep rumble, with an impatient tone, carefully tempered to show that he was holding back his schedule for Akechi's unreasonable demands. Be grateful you're even here, his posture said, one of crafted dismissal. Akechi smiles, unfazed. For the money, I will give you a card like this for you to draw your weekly funds from. I trust that you will not misuse it. Shido smoothly pulls a credit card from his wallet and places it on the table in plain sight. It's an obvious play to appeal to his past self's thirst for power and independence, and Akechi lets himself fall into the role of a poor orphan, leaning forward with interest before controlling his expression and bowing. Thank you, Shido-san. If there's a selection of apartments I can browse, I will gladly accept your offer, Akechi says. Shido's gaze is dark and assessing as he pulls a phone out of his pocket and taps out a number. Give me a summary of available apartments I own, not under the name Masayoshi Shido. He barks into the phone before he goes back to his quiet assessment of Akechi, his fingers steepled. Akechi smiles over his own annoyance. Vigilant, as always. The quiet between them didn't last long, however, as Shido soon passes him a pad which scrolled to show a few select apartments in Tokyo. Glossy pictures scroll under his fingertips of various apartments in various locations. Shibuya, Akiba, and even Roppongi pass under his fingertips, and Akechi makes sure to scroll with an appropriately excited face even as he sneers in his heart. Last time he had been given an apartment in a nondescript residential location close enough to his school, and he hadn't questioned Shido's offer until 5 months in. One day, he had opened the air conditioning unit to check how clean the filters were, and found a small spy cam. After the initial shock, Akechi had averted his eyes, not brave enough to remove it. Was this a power play by Shido, or was this supposed to be hidden from him forever? That moment of indecision had lasted an eternity as he carefully ignored the spy cam and took out the filter as if nothing was wrong. He closed the lid, near unbreathing as he walked to the washing room and chucked them in the sink. Then he power-walked to the door, hastily grabbing a scarf and hurtling outside into the snow that always came alongside Christmas. He clutched a mug of hot coffee with white-lipped desperation in the cafe a few streets down, surrounded by Christmas jingles and happy couples, and only left when a friendly waiter started to close the shop down around him. In the end, he returned to that apartment. It wasn't as if he had enough money to move out to his own place. Even his daily living expenses came from Shido. Despite that, he couldn't help his finger from stopping on the cold glass of the pad when he sees a picture of his past apartment. It's a small, dingy grey thing, and not even the best efforts of the photographer could have made those streaked grey walls and bare concrete flattering. But flat A402 had been the first and last place that he'd ever had of his own, even if it had been an illusion. His very first safe haven. Shido interrupts his nostalgia when he lingers for a second too long. Have you chosen? Widening his smile, Akechi clicks the pad off and places it back onto the table. Just before he starts speaking, he lets his left hand fiddle with his cuff. Thank you. I truly appreciate your offer, Shido-san. But may I offer a solution that may prove easier for everyone involved? Lean forward, tilt your head just enough to expose enough of the neck. Smile focused on the eyes. This was the best opportunity. Shido did not know him yet, was trying to figure him out. But he knows Shido. As you undoubtedly know, I have a full scholarship at Shogaku High. They have dormitories alongside excellent security, due to their reputation as one of the best schools in Tokyo. They also have an excellent location near Roppengai's major transit station. Shido frowns, and Akechi didn't miss the small flash of surprise in his eyes that's quickly repressed. You don't wish to own your own apartment? Shido asks slowly, shifting backwards to lean on his couch without breaking eye contact, clearly contemplating. No, Akechi says, and decides to throw him a bone. He still needs to appear controllable after all. A dormitory room will be fine, Shido-san, but I will gladly accept the credit card. Akechi smiles, one of his more gentle ones. He knows how it makes him look less threatening, friendly, and maybe even a little naive. Shido's eyes holds a reassessing gleam, looking at Akechi with more interest than he'd ever had in his previous life. He writes the extra additions into the contract and gives Akechi the new copy. Now it's absolutely clear where he would get the stipend from, and the apartment stipulation had changed to dormitory. Thank you. May I sign here? Unlike last time, his hand is steady and dry as he reaches out for the heavy fountain pen on the coffee table and signs both copies of the contract without a line out of place. In silence, Shido does the same, before handing him his copy and keeping the other himself. There's a few seconds where the two look at each other before Shido's shadowed eyes narrow in contemplation. You may be more interesting than I thought, Shido admits, smile holding a hint of expectation. Before Akechi can respond, the world freezes. A cold breath, a feeling like a pressure of the other side holds him down as a voice echoes in his head. I am thou, thou art I. Thou hast acquired a new vow. It shall become the wings of rebellion that breaketh thy chains of captivity. With the birth of the devil persona, I have obtained the winds of blessing that shall lead to freedom and new power. Heart thuddering and eyes wide, Akechi manages to fumble a thank you instead of whatever he had planned, bowing formally before quickly walking out when Shido waves a hand in dismissal. The hot, humid air of midsummer hits Akechi in a heavy blast of chatter, smoke, and energy as he walks out of the beautiful elegance of the foyer back into the busy late-night streets. He pushes forward against the crowds of Tokyo, clutching the folder holding his contract close to his chest as his mind whirls. Did his refusal of Shido's offer change Shido's role as justice? But moreover, did he reset all his arcanas too? Was it a true reset of everything? With a quiet sense of panic, he reaches into that quiet place of his soul and breathes a small sigh of relief. Devil, rank 1, Masayoshi Shido. Universe, rank 10, Arisato Minato. Minato is still there, and Shido, the devil. Akechi hums a little at the thought that he isn't as irredeemable as he thought. His feet lead him down the street, suppressing laughter bubbling out from somewhere deep in his chest, an uncontrollable elation. Although he would have preferred it if Minato hadn't dropped him straight in front of Shido right as they were signing their first contract, because Minato, why, not even half an hour sooner? Even a few days would have let him avoid Shido altogether. He now has a chance to change everything. Akira, bleeding out under his bullet, and the complicated wave of relief, guilt, anger, and utter hatred when he'd come out alive, reunited with his friends ready to tackle Shido. Akira, who had everything, a guide like Morgana, a band of friends ready to die for him on the bat. Of course he would come back alive, through a miraculous plot, surrounded by friends, facing the dastardly villain of his story in righteous determination. Akira, all too happy to see him on a late night, greeting him with a rare smile that he treated few people. LeBlanc's TV turned down to a background hum, Akira listening attentively as Akechi carefully selected what to say for the day, knowing whatever he said would be accepted with a nod, a quiet quip, focused eyes. Akechi hadn't hated that, would have gladly left Akira alone if Shido hadn't. Why did their arcana stop at rank 9? It's the question that buzzes in the back of his mind as it takes him an embarrassing amount of time to remember where his last foster family lives. A small apartment in Akiba, near a few neon-lighted love hotels that lit up his room in a sickly shade of pink where he slept. 2 years changes little, in the long run. But more than a few things lay definitely forgotten. Akechi stares at the security keypad under the gatekeeper, who obviously recognizes him, takes pity, and just buzzes him in. It's the only first-floor apartment, the cheapest one, and the corridor is dark and gloomy when he opens the door. The small dripping sounds of the kitchen faucet accompany him as he methodically takes off his shoes and pads into the room, turning on all the lights as he passes them to his room. If he remembers correctly, the father had major pachinko addiction, and the mother struggled to support the two as a cashier in a local store. They had only taken a foster kid in for the government benefits. They hadn't been abusive, not the worst he's had to live through. His body is weirdly heavy after all the time that he's spent out of it. It's not as if he and Minato had to sleep during their discussion in another eternity, but he's tired enough to remember the signs. His muscles are aching. His eyes feel dry and heavy, so he flops onto his bed with a sigh and lets himself sleep for the first time since he died. He'll plan to save the world tomorrow.